afternoon and welcome to BizTech's Asian Midday Market Watch. It's the 15th of January and together with my co-host Jeffery Halley, we have our guest today, Vishnu Varathan, Head of Economics and Strategy from Mizuho Bank, coming to us out of Singapore. Now, Vishnu, it's always great to have you on the show.
It's my pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me, and it's fantastic to be with two wonderful guys. So thanks.
Thank you very much. Now,
and that wonderful shirt.
And a very cool, colorful shirt. Both of you have very similar tastes. Look at Jeff's tie as well. But before we get your insights, Vishnu, today is Martin Luther King Day, so there's no trading in the US. I'm going to hand over take a look at the numbers across the region, and I'm going to hand that over to Jeff.
Okay, so it's a little bit of a mixed day on markets in Asia. Again, holiday trading has impacted on that. We look at Malaysia, Kuala Lumpur is up 0.5%. Shanghai is almost flat after the PBOC left its one-year MLF unchanged, surprising markets. Again, ASX almost flat. Nikkei 225 is up just under 1%. That's probably the market that's moving the most in Asia today. Hong Kong, again, almost unchanged, with South Korea's Kospi down just 0.12%.
Now, Vishnu, what's your take on market performance of the first half of the day?
Well, I mean, it does look like a bit of cautious optimism out there, primarily because softer than expected, US PPI numbers still have a little bit of a tailwind left in them to revive a bit of the, resumption of pivot bets. There's also going to be a whole slew of China data, so there's still hopes, despite the PBOC giving the MLF cut a miss today. I think there's still hopes that the PBOC might have some cuts up its sleeve and stimulus for the economy, particularly from triple R cuts or any other form of easing that they can announce. We remember that PBOC usually guides credit by quota, so not having a cut is not a tragedy in itself. So with the data coming through, and likely you're going to see a confirmation that 2023 China GDP growth was, cleared 5%, comfortably around 5.2%. So markets will probably find every excuse in the book to try to extend that little bit of risk-on rallies with the narrative of encouraging China recovery, exuberance about the Fed pivot cuts. Of course, me being the pessimist that I am, I believe some of that will moderate later. But let's leave me out of the picture.
I guess the next thing we should talk about is the events over the weekend, which was Taiwan's elections. Have you got any thoughts on those elections and any impact that they may have on markets?
That's a really good question. So we're struggling to think whether there's going to be any real impact on markets. The headline, of course, is as expected, but the loss of seats by the DPP that's going to deny them of any ability to pass through a legislative majority probably means that on the economic front, it's going to frustrate any policy progress and the chance to alleviate spots of economic weakness, despite the obvious lift that could come through in semiconductors. Everywhere else is a little weaker. So that part is not particularly encouraging, neither for the economy nor for the DPP if they want to extend another term. Ironically and quite perversely, on the diplomatic front, though, I use that term loosely, of course, what I meant was the geopolitical front, it might alleviate some of that cross-strait tensions, because even though Beijing will have to swallow an alignment with the US, the diminished legislative majority means that it'll be difficult for Taiwan to ramp up defense spending and other measures, and that's going to buy some time. So it won't lead to an imminent escalation in cross-strait tensions or friction. This could prove to be famous last words, but at least on paper, that's what the results suggest.
Now, Vishnu, we are at the start of the week. What's up from a data point or events perspective this week that we should be watching out for?
I think on the on the global front, in the US, I think markets will certainly want to watch the University of Michigan consumer sentiments to show that US exceptionalism is holding up, the consumer is still strong. And on the flip side, they want to see, that the inflation expectations subcomponent of that survey will show softer inflation expectations. Of course, they want that so-called immaculate disinflation story to hold. Along with that, the soft landing hopes. In Japan, CPI data will be watched because increasingly, people are trying to assess how Bank of Japan will proceed with policy. So clearly, I think inflation data is one of those things that they're watching. In the region, Bank Indonesia and Malaysia are up. Malaysia's Q4 GDP data probably will show an acceleration, but I think it will not really translate into an exhilaration for the ringgit, given there's still a bit of baggage left, and the path remains quite unclear. Bank Indonesia will probably hold, and in Australia we've got jobs data coming out. It would probably underline the fact that the RBA could, if they so choose, tighten a little bit further. But again, this is not necessarily guaranteed tailwinds for the Aussie. The reason why we don't think RBA hawks would seduce Aussie bulls is that there's still a little bit of uncertainty left out there in terms of what the dollar might do, and the lingering China risks that we, as miserable people, continue to look at and focus on.
Jeff, any final queries for Vishnu before we end the show?
I just wanted to touch on last Friday's PPI in the US, which came out quite soft. Do you think this has given some more tailwinds to the great Fed easing trade?
Definitely, Jeff. So it certainly created the excuse for, but not necessarily given proper justification. And the reason for that is we think the PPI data may be more indicative of some loss of pricing power rather than an across-the-board cooling of disinflation. So despite what Fed Powell said, thinking that the disinflation process is really chugging along unimpeded, we still have some reservations, particularly about the so-called last mile disinflation, and that's really a risky position to put forward, given that we also think that the Fed is going to cut tremendously by the middle of the year, because growth gives way rather than disinflation, over delivering.
Now, on that note, Vishnu, thank you very much for your insights. Thanks for coming on the show.
My pleasure. Thanks for the company, folks.
Now, we've been speaking to Vishnu Varathan, Head of Economics and Strategy at Mizuho Bank, and this has been BizTech's Asian Midday Market Watch. I'm Brian Fernandez.
And I'm Jeffery Halley.
And this show will be on our website, www.biztech.asia, as well as our syndication partners, TV stations, radio stations, and websites. Thanks a lot for tuning in.